held on the 7th of June. And again, a reminder, this meeting has been webcast with the exception of any business the Cabinet resolves to exclude the press and public because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. So can I start with asking if there's any apologies? No? Okay. I'll hand over to Gary as Monitoring Officer to deal with declarations of interest.
Thank you, Chair. If I just first of all clarify for those viewing the meeting who's present in the room and on Zoom. So in the chamber at County Hall, the members of Cabinet who are present are the Leader, Councillor McClellan, Councillors Emrys Wynne, Councillor Jill German, Councillor Ellen Heaton, Councillor Julie Matthews, Councillor Wynne James and Councillor Gwyneth Ellis. Attending remotely as members of Cabinet are Councillors Rhys Thomas and Barry Mellor. In the chamber, we have one observer member, which is Councillor Hugh Hilditch Roberts. And on the Zoom call, we have Councillors Ellie Chard, Councillor Gareth Sandlands and Councillor Hugh Irving. We also have, I see, joining now, Councillor Karen Edwards and Councillor Bobby Feely. Also present in the room are various officers supporting the meeting, including the Chief Executive, Graham Bowes, myself, Head of Legal, HR and Democratic Services, and if I just turn to declaration of interest, Leader, members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interest will be declared now, or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it's a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest who is attending remotely will be placed in the waiting room of the Zoom system. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate in any vote. If a personal or personal and prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available either in hard copy from staff here today or online.
Gary, thank you. Agenda item 3, urgent matters. I've not been notified of any matters to consider of an urgent nature today. Gary, no? Okay. So we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is to receive the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 12th of April 2022. I think we can just, that's all we can do is receive the minutes at the moment, as this is a new Cabinet and there was no one in this Cabinet sitting at that meeting yes. In a capacity as a Cabinet member.
Yes, Leader. The minutes are presented to you as an accurate record of the meeting which took place. It is perfectly proper for this meeting to approve those minutes. So once you've been through the minutes to check for accuracy, if anybody has any comments, then it is possible for members of this Cabinet to move and second the minutes and accept them.
Okay. The minutes, there are 10 pages. So we go first through pages 1 to 10 for accuracy. And we can go through pages 1 to 10 for any matters arising from the minutes. Pages 1 to 10. So if there's no issues arising from those minutes, yeah, if someone can move that they're an accurate reflection. They are, Emrys. And a seconder. Need a seconder. Okay, so we're moving on to the first substantial item of the Cabinet meeting today, and that's the Council agenda item 5, the Council performance self-assessment. 21 to 22, detailed report on the performance and self-assessment of various aspects of the council's work. And I'll hand over to Councillor Gwyneth Ellis as lead member.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to present this report briefly. It is a very comprehensive report with a great deal of useful information in it about the performance of the council over the past term, and it will be a report that will be necessary for us as a new cabinet moving forward and setting our priorities for the next term. I would like to propose one amendment to the recommendations, and that is that the wording is changed for recommendation 3.1. I would like to change it to that the cabinet confirms that the report is a correct reflection of the council's performance during 2021-22 and recommends that it be approved. On that note, I'd like to hand over, please, to Nicola and Yolo, who are joining us on Zoom to give further detail about the report. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much.
Bore da pawb.
Good morning, everyone.
So you have attached to the report 3 appendices before you today, and I'll just give you an overview of the purpose of each of those appendices, and then Yolo and I will also share some highlights, particularly focusing on the content of Appendix 1. So Appendix 1 is a new statutory document that you'll be receiving on an annual basis. It is our annual self-assessment, and it is a summary document which contains statements about performance against key governance functions within the council, and also performance against some of the key objectives that we'd set ourselves in our corporate plan, covering both the well-being objectives and the equality objectives under those pieces of legislation. The second appendix is a quarterly performance report. As the name suggests, it's produced 4 times a year, and this is the Q4 report that you've received, which contains a synopsis of what we've achieved throughout the year. So that's the year covering 21 to 22. It contains more in-depth analysis than that self-assessment that is in Appendix 1, and it's this report that is referred to in order for us to make those summary statements that are contained in Appendix 1. And finally, in Appendix 3, this is a document that we wouldn't bring to Cabinet every time, actually. It's a summary of where we were at the start of this corporate plan, and sets out what we hope to achieve, what the baseline was that from which we were judging our performance, and where we are now in terms of what we've managed to deliver during the 5 years of the previous corporate plan. So we're bringing these reports to Cabinet today, and this is the start of a journey that they'll go on through the committee process. These reports will also be taken to Governance and Audit Committee. They'll go to performance scrutiny, and finally we will bring this report to full council in mid to late July for their ratification. So what we're asking for today from Cabinet is, as Councillor Gwyneth Ellis mentioned, your approval that this report is an accurate reflection of what we've achieved over the past 12 months. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Yolo now, who's going to introduce the self-assessment, and we'll share with you some of the highlights. Thank you.
All right, good morning, pawb. So I'm just going to briefly touch on, before we go through the highlights, I'm just going to explain a little bit about the context of these reports. Returning councillors will be familiar with Appendix 2. It is our quarterly performance report. Quarters 2 and 4 are tabled in committees, so you will have seen them there, but quarters 1 and 3 are circulated to all members as well for information. The report that we present here in Appendix 2 does not stand alone. It is part of the set of the 4 reports that we have produced throughout the year. And Appendix 1 is the summary of all 4. So Appendix 1 is not just looking at the content of Appendix 2 as it stands now, it is a summary of the whole year. And through that mechanism of the quarterly performance reports, we are meeting new requirements under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, which requires us to have this sort of process for ongoing self-assessment. And in addition to that as well, we've had to develop new systems around stakeholder engagement. The list of stakeholders that we are required to consult with on an annual basis is quite considerable now under the legislation. You name it, they are there. It's a very comprehensive list. And we've implemented a new process for that. The results from that are included in the tables from tables in Appendix 2. And we've also, alongside that work, bolstered the way in which we produce these reports throughout the year. So as a routine now, all 4 quarterly performance reports look at the principal items that go to the principal committees, Council, Cabinet, Governance and Audit, and all the scrutiny committees. So effectively, the main business of the council, the really important stuff that the council is debating on a day-to-day basis. All those items are drawn out and included in these quarterly performance reports. We also draw out news items that we've released as an authority, good news items about our progress, updates on projects, but also examples where perhaps we've acted in response to an emergency. So those sort of news items that we're routinely pushing out, these reports seek to highlight those. So it's a very comprehensive report, as Councillor Ellis said in her introduction. But for the first time, we produced Appendix 1 because it was a lesson that we learnt from piloting this approach with our annual performance report at the end of 2020 to 2021. It was over 100 pages. It was far too large a document to make easily accessible. So Appendix 1 is our first attempt, our first stab at that, essentially. I just wanted to draw members' attention to 2 things in the Appendix 2, one correction, in Appendix 1. The eagle-eyed amongst you will see in the published papers that Appendix 1 actually says self-assessment for 2022 to 2023. It should read 2021 to 2022, so apologies for that. And that's been corrected now for future committees and obviously the final published set. And also just to reassure members that you will see in Appendix 2 highlighted in yellow in various places, missing data around our carbon change programme. These are critical indicators for measuring our success with addressing the climate emergency. We are hopeful that that data will be with us, certainly in time for council, but if not in time for council, by the time this is finally published. But we are all pushing to get the data in time for council, so that members have an opportunity to consider it then. So that's all I wanted to mention for now. I'll hand it back to Nicola to draw out some highlights from the corporate plan side of things.
Thank you very much, Yola. So again, referring to Appendix 1, just wanted to draw out some key messages really for Cabinet and members to take away with them today. In terms of equality, some of the things that we've achieved this year, we've produced an interim strategic equality plan as we continue to work on developing a 5-year plan. We've introduced measures to support accessibility and diversity in democracy, and we'll continue to work on those. And we've also undertaken a comprehensive research and engagement exercise to better understand the experiences of residents in our communities who live with protected characteristics. This has informed the wellbeing assessment, which is a key planning strategic planning tool that we work on, and it has highlighted to us that there's ongoing opportunity for us to monitor the experience of people with living protected characteristics and build on that good work that we've done over the course of this year. In terms of housing, which is one of our priorities, we set ourselves very ambitious targets, and against them we're actually making good progress, and in some cases exceeding the goals that we set for ourselves, particularly in terms of, for example, the supply of affordable housing. Nevertheless, demand for housing continues to outstrip supply, so it remains a challenge for us, and particularly leaves some challenges for us when we consider the task of homelessness prevention. Another one of our priorities is that around connected communities, which largely focuses on infrastructure, be that a road network, a bridges network, and also a digital network, and the skills that our residents have for living in the digital world. There's been much support over the last few years to support to reduce digital exclusion. Our road condition, although it has improved, is still requires ongoing investment, and quite a significant level of investment is likely to be required for us to maintain that position. And similarly, the digital infrastructure across the county, although it has improved, it still lags behind the position that we'd like it to be in for our communities. So that's something that that is likely to be something that we'd like to continue working on in the future. Another priority that we have is around resilient communities, and that's looking both at independent resilience and also the resilience of our communities and the levels of community cohesion. Recently, we've become a council that is officially working towards being dementia friendly, and we've worked to receive that accreditation in conjunction with the Alzheimer's Society. There have been some important themes that we've worked on in terms of working with partnership and also in terms of awareness raising. So, for example, we've done a lot of work over the last 12 months to raise awareness of domestic abuse and the options that people might have in terms of dealing with domestic abuse. And but there have also been, or there will continue to be, challenges that we'll face in terms of supporting independent resilience. They're particularly in terms of resourcing care, both from a financial perspective and also in terms of capacity and recruitment. However, just still remaining on the subtopic of carers, we have over the past 12 to 24 months launched a carers strategy in recognition of the important work that our carers do. And we've developed that strategy in conjunction with carers and with key partners as well. In terms of the environment, we've made great strides over the last few years in terms of developing a programme for improving environmental resilience across the county. There's been extensive tree planting. We've undertaken multi-million pounds worth of flood prevention work, and we've also developed a climate and ecological change strategy, which has 3 key pillars in it. The first one is that Denbighshire currently has an ambition to become a net zero carbon organisation by 2030. We plan to enhance biodiversity and also to reduce the carbon from our supply chain emissions. So they're the key pillars really of our climate and ecological change strategy that's been developed over the past couple of years and is a roadmap for us up until 2030. Although we have that plan in place, we shouldn't underestimate the challenge that's involved with that, with delivering against that. There is some projects for us to develop that will be both costly and that will require us to think creatively and ambitiously about where we can reduce carbon emissions and also offset any carbon emissions. And finally, I wanted to give you an overview of our progress against the priority that we have for supporting young people. We've done a lot of work recently to consider the well-being, skills and employment opportunities and work experience opportunities for young people. But obviously, as you'd expect with a priority around young people, there is a significant focus on education within here, and the pandemic has raised some challenges in terms of education. Attendance and timetabling have been challenges over the past couple of years, and it's likely that that will exacerbate inequality in the future. We will also be focusing on introducing a new curriculum over the next few years. So attainment will continue to be a focus for us as we move forward from the impact of the pandemic. Okay, thank you very much. Yolo, I'll hand over to you to cover some of the governance areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. So within the governance section, which we've entitled Corporate Health in Appendix 2, there are 7 headings that are predetermined by the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and the statutory guidance requires us to report on these. So first of all, corporate planning is our heading. So within the last year, we've met a great many new and recurring legislative requirements that have had significant implications for strategic planning. Also in a year when we've had to appoint a new chief executive. So we've got quite robust plans in place for the development of our new corporate plan as well. So there's a lot of positives that have occurred in terms of corporate planning. We've also implemented arrangements for new EU replacement and levelling up funds, which previously there were no processes in place for managing these new funds. So we've put those in place. Challenges for us in the year ahead will obviously be the position with the SLT restructure, which will bring change with it. And also new ways of working and how that embeds going forward. The next heading covers financial planning. I'm a bit nervous talking about this in front of Steve Gadd, but hopefully I get it right. We have strong processes overall. That's been confirmed by our independent auditors. There's been a welcome move towards 3 to 5 year budgeting. In the year, there are significant budget variations that need to be managed. And also issues around the timetabling of the statement of accounts, which does put a lot of capacity pressure on our finance teams. So I know the timetable that has been approved has been done so in conversation with our auditors, and also obviously with Welsh Government. But more broadly, challenges that we're facing in terms of financial planning are the rising costs globally. You know, the situation in Ukraine, COVID, Brexit, you name it, they are putting pressure on the council's purse. And another consideration going forward as well will be the transition in of the Revenues and Benefits Service. The next heading looks at performance management. Audit Wales gave an opinion that our performance management arrangements are effective in the council. We've also strengthened our performance reports, as I've just mentioned. The quarterly performance reports have been strengthened to meet new legislative requirements, and we have a more robust process around self-assessment now. For the future, we will look to make some improvements to our reporting system, and we will also be looking ahead to the new performance management framework for the corporate plan that members will approve, and what opportunities that brings. The other consideration as well in terms of our performance management is reinstating our performance challenge program. It is a requirement within our performance management framework that we have a performance challenge for each of our services, and potentially that will chime with some recommendations that we have received back from Audit Wales around transparency of publishing performance data. So that's a conversation that will need to take place in the year ahead. Risk management is our next heading. So we've actually improved our risk management methodology following internal audit recommendations, focusing particularly on embedding risk appetite further, but also around how we monitor our controls that are in place. Overall, I would say engagement by officers and members has been very good with our risk management framework. The only caveat to risk management is that there are a significant number of risks now, again, relating to changes in the global affairs. So because of the increasing number of risks, my team have actually developed now a more accessible summary to help staff and members be updated on a rolling 6-month basis around new risks. Workforce planning. HR have been working to address issues that have been brought about in the wake of COVID, including addressing our DBS backlog, significant issues, obviously, around recruitment and retention of staff. So a lot of work has taken place around those issues. But broadly, we now have strong workforce planning arrangements in place. HR have also supported, obviously, new ways of working, emphasis on training for managers and staff to cope with new ways of working, and an emphasis particularly on mental health, which has been a great success in the last year. But as new ways of working continues to be rolled out, there will be ongoing challenges to consider there. Assets, significant challenges again, I'm afraid. We have a large road and bridges network that is perennially in need of investment, as Nicola has already mentioned. We also now have the carbon emergency, which puts significant pressure on us in terms of how we address that, in terms of the carbon output of our buildings, our estate, and our absorption of carbon. So we've made great strides in the last 2 years, positive steps towards improvement in that regard, but there's still an awful lot to do. With regards to roads and bridges, we have invested a great deal. And similarly, we've flood risk is a significant issue on our estate. So we have put actions in place to support flood alleviation in the last year. We have a increasingly growing ICT infrastructure. So the council has implemented further actions to support that. And we've put new frameworks also in place around our property portfolio to help with ongoing maintenance. The immediate challenge, again, is around new ways of working and how we accommodate that within our assets strategy. And then finally, procurement. The procurement team's made significant improvements to advice and support available to services and encouraged good procurement practice. Decarbonisation actions have been hampered due to management capacity, but I know there are intentions to recruit expertise in that regard. We've made good progress as well in the progression of collaborative projects with positive outcomes for individuals in our communities, particularly in terms of sustained work placements, for example. Challenges ahead will be the sustainability of our community benefits hub, but also the adoption of a new procurement strategy by the end of the summer, I believe. So that's my run through. Nicola, was there anything else we wanted to mention?
No, I think we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
And Nicola, thank you. Very comprehensive, overarching report. I'm conscious, I think I should be looking at this screen. So before we go to questions and comments, just I think Gwyneth's amendment on the recommendations was sensible. If I can just return to Gary to confirm the wording, and then we'll need that to be seconded as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the English version of the wording of the recommendation, I'll just get it up now, apologise, is that Cabinet confirms that the Council's performance self-assessment report is an accurate reflection of the Council's performance during 2021-2022 and recommends its approval by Council. So once you've completed the debate on the item, if you want to ask Councillor Ellis to move that recommendation and then have a seconder, then you can take the vote.
Yeah, Gary, thanks for clarifying that. So I'll open up then to questions or comments. Julie?
Chair. Well, it is a comment rather than a question, really, that I just wanted to put on record my appreciation for the executive summary. I know that Yola mentioned that it was a new initiative, and as a new cabinet member, and indeed as a new cabinet, it was very gratefully received. Although I've been through all the quarterly reports and the detail in the corporate plan, the executive summary is the thing that I will be taking forward now to inform the new corporate plan, of course, as we move into that territory. So I just wanted to put on record that I think you've done a really good job, and I would consider that it's hit the mark that what you set out for it to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Julie?
I was just going to say the same as Jill, to be honest. So yeah, but yeah, it was a very good comprehensive plan. I welcome in particular the equalities bit and the interim to strategic equality plan that we're going to be working on soon. So yeah, okay.
Emrys?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much for this very comprehensive report, covering what happened during the last quarter of the previous council. Can I quickly refer to matters that concern me that aren't in the report? I understand you can't report on something that isn't there, but I'm hoping that in the future we will be reporting on any progress in active travel provision in the county. And of course, I've got a special interest in the Ruthin area with regards to that. In the report, it refers to extra care. And may I say, I know from what I've told that the new provision in our Dyffryn in Denbigh is being highly praised, very highly praised. And I feel that those who take up this provision really appreciate what is provided for them. I'm looking forward to seeing the same provision extended in Ruthin. There have been a number of efforts to start the work, but there's been something cropping up to intervene all the time. Is it possible now for us to say that the demolition team will get there in June, as it says in this report? And I was also promised from the group Cynefin stall on the Eisteddfod, can we have confirmation that that will happen in June, please?
Nicola, you're able to assist Emrys with the question?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't quite catch that. Is that a response to the question?
Are you able to respond to Councillor?
Yes. Sorry, yes. In terms of future reporting and active travel, this report will always be aligned to our corporate plan and corporate strategies. So we'll certainly reference whatever features in our corporate plan, which is in development at the moment, and will hopefully be ratified by Council in October. In terms of the extra care, yeah, I would echo that. I've heard really good reports as well about the facility in Denbigh. Nicholas Stubbins, would you have an update at all about the prospect of demolition starting in Wellon in Ruthin? If not, we can come back to you, Councillor Wynne.
Yeah, I'm just checking on that because I know that there are currently meetings happening on a very frequent basis. I know there was a meeting last week with key stakeholders, including local residents of the facility. So my understanding is it's supposed to start end of June, early July. That is the information that we've had currently from Group Cynefin. So that's the latest information that we have, but we can continue to keep members updated as that development progresses. Diolch.
Oh, diolch, Nicola, thank you. If there's no further questions or comments from Cabinet, I'll open to non-Cabinet members, and I'm looking at the screen, and I can see Councillor Bobby Feely has a hand up. Bobby, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Although I am quite tempted to answer Emrys's question, I won't. I'll ask my own. As well as being a Cabinet member in the previous regime, I was also an enthusiastic member of the Climate Change and Ecological Emergency Working Group. Such was the importance of the future of our planet, it was recommended that we devote a Cabinet role to it. I wonder if our new Cabinet did consider this and decided against it, or was it not considered at all?
Yeah, I can answer that. And obviously, of course, it was considered. It's a hugely important subject, a hugely important topic. And I'm very satisfied that it sits neatly with Councillor Mellor's brief on transport and waste management, clearly two massive issues that face the council and dovetail very neatly with the subject of climate change. Climate change is going to be a huge part of the work of this Cabinet. Our targets on becoming carbon net zero are going to be vigorously adhered to, and we're going to work extremely hard to meet them. And there is a Cabinet portfolio, Bobby, and it sits very neatly with Barry, and I'm very, very pleased and happy that Barry can take that role on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask a question, Chair?
Joan, thanks.
I'm sorry, Leader. I've been looking for the button for the hand, and unfortunately, it just baffles me completely. I can't find it on this machine, so do forgive me. But I did want to ask a question about the carbon footprint, and all new buildings now see defences and everything that is new builds, if you like, in Denbighshire or indeed anywhere, do have and have to have a report on the carbon footprint by the developers. The developers are and do produce these documents, but I think that I've never seen one on any reports coming to DCC or indeed to planning of the carbon footprint on new builds, and certainly of the sea defences, the proposed sea defences, the new ones in Frill West. And I would like to ask, Leader, if indeed that in the future we could have these prominently displayed somewhere on the reports so that we can see, and I'm sure Barry will take this up, but Leader, we do need this issue highlighting and making sure that we do see them from every new build that is proposed or indeed happening within Denbighshire. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. That's an excellent point. I'll be honest, I wasn't aware of that point you make, but certainly I'll speak to Barry and we'll speak to planning and the relevant officers, and we'll make sure that that happens. And Wynne, as lead member, you want to come in on that? Thanks, Wynne.
Thank you.
I do appreciate that this is a very important point, and already you will find that Rill Town Council have this on their planning. Every planning application is required to have this statement on it, and I think that this is something that I would like to take forward in Denbighshire.
So we'll note that.
Can't you, Councillor Butterfield?
We'll note that and move forward. Yeah, thanks very much. Go to the technical point of adopting Gwyneth's amendment. So if you'd like to just reread the amendment and then propose that, and we'll look for a second.
No, the Welsh translation is my own translation, so
So I propose that we change the recommendation to this wording, that Cabinet confirms that the self-assessment report of the council's performance is a correct reflection of the council's performance during 2021-22 and recommends that it be approved by the council.
Okay, so all those in favour of adopting that amendment and then adopting that as the recommendation from Cabinet. All in favour? Looking to the screen as well for East Deal. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Excellent debate, and thank you once again to Yola and Nicola. Very comprehensive report. Thank you.
Diolch.
Apologies, I didn't have the mic on. It's a very important piece of work. Agenda item 6. It's a partnership approach to promote economic development across the North Wales region. Welsh Government, North Wales Economic Ambition Board are going to be working collectively to deliver. They'll be working with the public sector, private sector and the third sector. The recommendations for the report today are to endorse and recommend the report as something that the council will take on. It's an important report. It's a vehicle for where Welsh Government funding priorities are going to be. So that's obviously very important for Denbighshire. I had a meeting with Emlyn Jones, who I believe is joining us, and Gareth Roberts, and that's been very helpful. So again, I'm looking at the screen, and I think I'm handing over to yourself, Gareth.
Leader, it's Emlyn here. I'll take us through initially, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. So thank you for the introduction there. I think the regional economic framework that you've got here today in front of you reflects and builds on a lot of the existing work that happens regionally on economic development. So it's therefore important to note that it doesn't duplicate any of the work that is ongoing at the moment. It just reflects and builds on that good work that's already very well established in North Wales, and it's seen as a framework that will sit above many of the plans and strategies that are in place already or will work to be developed over the months and years in front of us. So it was developed and led by Welsh Government, and it was developed through looking at existing work, but also by developing regional workshops with many partners, including the local authorities and us as a local authority, and other partners such as further education and others. So it's really an output from all those workshops and discussions, and I think it sets out a different way of looking at economic growth, and it's referenced in the documents that it is about more sustainable growth and a more holistic approach to well-being and so on. So I think it's taking a bit of a wider stance and a wider approach to the economy that has been previously done. The document itself sets out 3 main kind of priorities for North Wales, and these have come from the workshops that were held, those being social and community well-being economy, experience economy, and low carbon and low emissions economy. So those are the 3 kind of main headlines, and you'll see from the documents, and it has a fairly kind of visual diagram against each of those priority areas, which sets out the themes and the kind of sub priorities of all those of those 3 really. So just to summarize, the REF itself, the Regional Economic Framework, has been approved by the North Wales Economic Ambition Board, and it was co-produced by the Economic Ambition Board, as the leader mentioned earlier on. And following that recommendation, it was encouraged and asked that each of the local authorities consider the framework and hopefully support it moving forward. And 3 of those local authorities have done that before the election, and we are doing it post the election. So it's really important to also note, just as a final comment, that much of the work now will be done following the adoption of the ref, and that will result in more detailed delivery plans, more detailed project development happening after the adoption of the regional economic framework. This is very much a high level framework that will be subject to much more work and developments after today, really, as a region. So hopefully, Leader, that kind of sets out a bit of the detail to add to your introduction. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Emlyn. So I'll open to Cabinet members for any comments or questions. Gwyneth.
Diolch Arweinydd.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very pleased to see the collaboration between Welsh Government, regional local authorities on this report, and I welcome the document, and I'm very happy to support it and for us to adopt this framework. But there are a couple of things in the document which have drawn my attention. The north of this country has got 22% of the population, but according to this report, only 13% of Wales' registered students are registered in North Wales. I would like to see an ambition in the report and details about how we're going to increase that percentage to reflect the percentage of the population, because I think that's really important in order to retain our young people in the area. And then in a similar vein about renewable energy, 37% of Wales's renewable energy is produced in North Wales, which is excellent, but only 8% by local ownership. So I'd like to see more detail about how to increase that percentage as well, so that there's more welfare from these retained in our communities where those schemes are based. Thank you. Thank you, Gwyneth.
Retaining young adults, qualified young adults in the area as part of the economic growth. So that's a good point. Can I go back to Emlyn to answer Gwyneth's points, please?
Yeah, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much. I certainly agree that this is the start of the journey for us today as a council and also as a region. So certainly the higher education colleges have been part of the process to date, and I will ensure that officers of Welsh Government are aware of your comments this morning about and what we think is important to be given more development, more attention following today. So certainly the framework itself refers to a great deal about developing opportunities for young people to have better jobs in the sectors that are important to us as a region. But your specific point is very important, and I will certainly make sure that Welsh Government is aware of that point and that we want further detail to move that forward. And also the point regarding renewable energy. I know that there are schemes in place in the south of the county at the moment. And in the same manner, I will make sure that officials in Welsh Government are aware of our intention to see more of this happening and that they are part of the developments from now on in. Thank you.
Diolch, Emlyn. Diolch yn fawr. Joe, apologies.
Diolch, Chair. I just wanted to come in after Councillor Ellis's point about making sure that we've got the right skill set in the area. And I do think we could actually do more with that as far as involving our schools as well. We've got a fantastic opportunity with the new curriculum to really tailor our offer locally to what is applicable to our young people, so that they're feeding up into that, you know, that college environment. You know, there's very much a focus on the world of work. There's a focus on how you know, that they can be well aware of what their community offers and what their local landscape is. So you know, I'd like to see that information is fed down into schools, so that, you know, the pupils coming up who go on to be our college students are already in the loop with you know, what we're looking at and what our area has to offer.
Emlyn, are you able to?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, so support the point that was made. We have got a regional skills partnership that's in place, and that's closely aligned to the North Wales Economic Ambition Board and the Welsh Government officers that work within the region. So that's something that I can pick up on to ensure that those things are aligned. There's lots of different, as I mentioned previously, I think there's lots of different strategies and work that goes on already, and this regional framework helps to pick all those up and give it a strategic context sitting above all these different strategies and work. So therefore I'll certainly pick up on that point around schools, around skills, and I think the links are there. The aim of this document is to pull it all together and then to build on some of the weaknesses or gaps that there may be in the region at the moment. So, but certainly I'll pick up on that point in discussions regionally going forward. So, diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Emlyn. I've got Emrys and Julie.
Thanks once again, Chair. A very comprehensive report once again, and I welcome it as a report. And I would like to draw attention to just a few elements of it. There's an emphasis on maintaining the sustainable rural economy. There's always the temptation to use the A55 and the A55 corridor as the focus of all developments, but it's very important that we still keep an eye on the establishments and organisations and businesses that we have in the south of Denbighshire, and the other counties in North Wales have got a similar situation, in order to make sure that the rural economy develops. And we'll have to, of course, look at the transport and the condition of our roads from north to south and south to north, to make sure that goods can be transported from the less accessible areas to make them places where it's natural for people to want to be there, want to develop businesses there, and also want to live there. There's reference also to homes in communities. It is important that we sustain our communities with suitable housing for those communities. And there's similar wording in the report, and that we don't develop too much, but that we develop really carefully in order to achieve this. Thank you.
Diolch, Emrys. I'll go back to Emlyn.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn am y sylwadau.
Thank you very much for the comments. Certainly, economic development in our rural areas is a very important point for our counties in this region. So I think that the nature of this framework, which includes many things which haven't been included previously, such as transport, as you referred to, digital infrastructure, active travel, a lot of those things which are so important to have a much more holistic perspective of the economy. They're all included in this framework. So that's important for us as a region to not lose sight of the issues that you referred to and their contribution to the wider economy and people's ability to go to work, to learn, to get opportunities. So similar to the previous point, there's a great deal of work going on a day-to-day basis on all of these issues. And this will feed up into the regional framework. So certainly, as with the previous point, I will make sure that your points are also raised in the discussions that we are part of. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just picking up with what Emlyn's already said, really, that there is a point in the document about supply chains and maximising opportunities for Indigenous companies. I think perhaps if there are identified gaps in supply chains, that what we perhaps do is support the development of Indigenous companies in Denbighshire to fill those gaps and train people, offer opportunities to young people, for example. But as Emlyn said, it's taking that holistic approach. But if there are gaps, let's keep it in Denbighshire and try and build the community, as it's talking about. It's the community economy, the wellbeing economy from the ground up within Denbighshire.
That's important, Julie. Thank you. Emlyn, do you have anything to add to that? I know we've touched on this before.
Yes, we have. No, I think I absolutely agree, and we've got quite a good baseline of data at the moment, both regionally and locally, to understand where some of those gaps are. We've done quite a bit of research, particularly during the pandemic period, when we were talking about COVID recovery plans and where some new opportunities are coming forward, but also where the gaps are. So certainly, yes, I agree that should form part of the work programme really for the region. So diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Emlyn. And there's no further questions or comments from Cabinet members. I'll go to members joining us on screen. And I think, Gareth, I can see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Leader. My question really was for the Chief Exec. So, Graham, we've heard a lot about the economy and what skills we need within our Denbighshire County Council to forward this on, both regionally and locally. When can we expect the recruitment of the director who focuses on the economy to come into it? Some sort of timeline would be ideal. We obviously had an economic ambition board focused on our own economic strategy a few years ago. How does that dovetail, and what is the outcomes of the regional plan for us locally within Denbighshire? I'm obviously focused on what we can provide and get best value for money from the regional partnership, but we still need to begin what's in it for us, basically. So I'd be very interested to hear your viewpoint on how this is going to affect us as a concentrated on Denbighshire, especially for smaller businesses. And as Councillor Julie once said, it was much welcomed in her response to how we can put the money back and recycle the money back into the economic cycle in Denbighshire. So thank you very much for that.
There's a specific question on the appointment of the new director, and then perhaps, I don't know, Emlyn could come in on Gareth's wider second point that he made.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Leader, no, thank you. On the director, Gary can help me with dates, perhaps. I'll just put Gary on standby. The job of the corporate director for environment and economy as the deadline for that has ended. So we've been advertising for that post. We're in the process of shortlisting this week and probably into next week. I think we have interviews for the post towards the end of June, and the decision will be taken at full council. Gary?
5th of July.
5th of July, thank you. Yeah, so 5th of July, hopefully we'll be able to be in a position to make an appointment on the 5th of July. So hopefully that helps Councillor Sandilands. And in the wider point, I agree with the Leader. I'll ask Emlyn to come in around some of those issues. I think we've broadly covered them. What I would say, of course, is that the trick for us as a local authority working in partnership is to play our part in the partnership, to work with partners across the region, but to make sure that we maximise the benefits for Denbighshire. And that's the trick for us, is to be a partner in the wider space, but to make sure that those opportunities, we maximise them in terms of the inward investment, opportunities for existing companies, and therefore opportunities for skills for our local residents to maximise the benefits. Emlyn, I don't know if you've got anything to add there.
I can just come in, Graham, and emphasise that this is very much, the emphasis is on partnership working, on collaborative working. working with Welsh Government, North Wales Economic Ambition Board, which as leader I'll be sitting on and taking an active part in. And it's just bringing those threads together, Gareth, I think, making sure that collaborative work works for Denbighshire. But I'll hand over to Emlyn now.
Oh, diolch yn fawr. No, I think you've covered it very well around the regional working. Lots going on in that field for us, and very much involved in maximising the the outcomes for our county. I think what I would add on a couple of other points that Councillor Sandilands made was the Denbighshire Economic and Community Ambition Strategy that was in place, and it runs until I believe 2023. So therefore, it would be logical and the right thing for us to do to be working with members and understand how we review that strategy now and how we take it moving forward, particularly probably under a new corporate plan, possibly. So the timescales would fit. And importantly, just around that local support, I think that is very much still in place. You know, we have a really active and proactive team that works, on supporting our businesses. I think it's really what we've done, I think, better over the last probably a year or two, is to have that kind of one council approach around business support. So we're working really closely as economic development, work in Denbighshire, tourism. It's all kind of interlinked because we're dealing with the same businesses in different, and it's about coordinating that contact, isn't it, really, and making sure that we are kind of aligning ourselves and talking and having the right conversations and providing that right support. So certainly lots of local support still there, but the right regional discussions going on as well, really. So diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Emlyn. Diolch yn fawr, pawb.
When you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Leader. I'm sorry, I'm going back a little bit, but we were talking about connectivity in the report. And I noticed that there's no reference to the railways in here. And given the huge emissions that come from cars, motorcycles, buses, vans, are there any moves to actually move people onto the railways rather than on our congested roads?
Leader, is that okay if I come in on that point? Yep. Certainly, I mean, I might look to Gareth to help me here with it, but if I remember from the documents there, I'm certain I've seen proposals and reference to low carbon transport and the development of a better, improved public transport network in the region. Gareth, sorry to put you on the spot there. Is that something you've picked up? I'm sure I've seen it in the document somewhere, but you may be aware of it compared to me. So is that okay?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, yeah, it's referenced on page 21 of the document, where it refers to a section referring to public transport, and it references working in partnership to ensure public transport provides an alternative to cars across the region as well as cross borders. So it is referencing that, and it is cited in there. Yes.
Very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Wayne.
It helps as well, Leader. I know the North Wales Economic Ambition Board looking at transport, and they're looking at rail and how we can improve the rail journey experience for those residents in North Wales. And electrification, of course, is one of the priorities the region has, and that's pressure that the region is putting on national governments, etc., for that significant investment, which would improve the rail links across the North Wales coast. So hopefully that's helpful, but it is a focus for the Economic Ambition Board as well as this document around ensuring low carbon transport, as Gareth has said, and rail is a big part of that and is recognised as a big part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. Barry, you got your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to say that Welsh Government putting a paper together and it is due shortly, on transport. So I know I had speaking a couple of weeks ago with Tony Ward about this. So as soon as that paper's out, I'm sure that'll give us an insight of where they want to see transport going throughout Wales. Just to mention that. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Barry, and that's a good point because it illustrates the, I'll come back to this theme of collaboration and partnership, that is a Welsh Government paper that's going to be produced soon on the issue of public transport, something Welsh Government have been working on, and that will, no doubt, looking at Emlyn and Gareth now, that will feed into the work of the economic framework. So yeah, it's an excellent point. Thanks, Barry. There's no more speakers wishing to, no one wishing to speak further. So there's been some themes picked up, and I'm sure Emlyn and Gareth, you've picked them up around making sure that qualified young people return to the area, and we have locally based renewable energy, which will be important to the green agenda going forward. This is rolled out an early stage in school in terms of skills and training. Emrys has made the good point that the framework needs to work for all economies, the rural economy as well. You've heard concerns about gaps in the procurement side, but you know that they'll be looked at. And we've talked about public transport. So I think there's been a really good debate today, and I'm grateful for the report, and I'm grateful that everyone has delved into the report, had a good look at it, and we've digested it well today and come out with these matters that are I won't use the word concerns, but they're matters that need raising and need addressing as part of the framework going forward. Having said all that, as to quote Emlyn, it's a high-level document, and I think we're very much at the start of the journey with this. And the nature of the framework is such that everything that we've discussed today can be taken on board and be part of the plans going forward. So I'm grateful for the discussion and for Emlyn and Gareth to be able to address the points that have been raised. So if we come to the recommendations, the recommendation is that we adopt and endorse the economic framework. I know we've raised some issues, but I don't think any of those issues are such that we would not do that. So all in favour of the council adopting and okay, so that's carried. Thank you very much. I'll put this out there. We've got one agenda item left, but it is quite a hefty agenda, as finance reports always are. So we can crack on, or we could have perhaps a short 10-minute break. But have a break. Okay, thank you. Thanks. So welcome back after a short break, and it's the agenda item 7, the finance reports from Councillor Gwyneth Ellis with Steve Gadd making a presentation as well. So I can hand over to Gwyneth in the first instance.
Thank you, Leader. You're going to have a very short presentation to a very comprehensive report again. We're looking at the revenue situation for the period previous to this council and this cabinet, of course, but Steve will explain the details. It is important that we do look at the way we use our reserves and the balances as we move forward. So I'm hoping that Steve has joined us, and I can hand over to Steve now, please. Thank you.
Diolch, Gwyneth, and pawb. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think a good introduction from Gwyneth. I think that's exactly what this report is. It's an annual report that comes to Cabinet, and it's when we close down the management accounts of the year before, so from up to March 2022. So as Gwyneth says, it is a backward-looking report in that sense. It's similar to the assessment report. But what it does do also, as Gwyneth mentioned, is set out the financial position we're in at the start of the new financial year. So it sets out what schools' balances are, what our reserves position are, whether services have underspends to carry forward, etc. So in that sense, it's sort of setting the scene for the new financial year, but the focus is on just reporting the budget performance, looking backwards. This needs to be approved prior to submission of the statement of accounts, and obviously the statement of accounts is a lot more technical document. This is based on the management accounts, so it's important that this comes first. Usually it comes in May. Obviously with the elections it's slightly delayed, and normally every month we have a finance report that looks at the monthly monitoring, and I say this one is the one-off one that you have every year to just sum up the activities for the full year. So the important bits to note, I suppose, are covered in the recommendations. So to note the final outturn position, and then to note the treatment of reserves and balances and the earmarked reserves. And I'll go through those in the appendices. The appendices, there's 4 of them. I'll go through each one in turn very quickly, but there'll be a summary position for the council as a whole. Appendix 2 summarises the position for service underspends. Appendix 3 goes through schools individually, so you'll see each school balance as it stands at 31st of March, and then a similar report but for the rest of the council, so for the council's reserves and balances, so you'll have a full summarised picture of the financial position of the council. Before we go to the appendices, I just want to highlight 2 things in the report itself. On page 182, section 4, at the top there, we received Welsh Government funding during March this year, which was in an unusual way, or a new way. And it actually, what they did was increase our revenue support grants very late in the year. And they did this to address some of our concerns about receiving hypothecated funding late in the year, and then it's difficult for us to obviously react to that and spend it. So Welsh Government wanted to give us funding, and the best way to do that is to actually give us it unhypothecated, and then we can carry it forward into the new year and spend it in a more planned way. So that's what they did. It was £60 million announced for the whole of Wales. Our share is 1.994. Although the whole of that 1.994 is unhypothecated, they did ask that 10 million of that for the whole of Wales, which equates to 332k for Denbighshire, is used for improving travel arrangements of care workers, and especially sort of reducing the carbon impact, so electric vehicles and things like that. So we're honouring that request really, and so we've put that 332k in a specific reserve, and the service is working on plans this financial year to spend that money on that activity, and I'm sure we'll be asked to report on it to Welsh Government. The remaining 1.662 we've put in the budget mitigation reserve, and as it says in that paragraph there, we're aware that services will be facing the impact of the inflation. Obviously in April, the latest figure was 9%. Any service that uses diesel, petrol will see these increases, so and lots of other pressures as well. So we're aware that there are pressures out there, and we wanted to put that in an unhypothecated reserve so we could help services going forward when we go through the monitoring. The other thing I just wanted to point out before we go through the appendices is at the bottom of that page, and it's just to highlight the ongoing help from Welsh Government we've received, the funding we've received to respond to the coronavirus pandemic. So last year, the amount directly received, and this isn't for additional funding that we've received from Welsh Government for almost nice to haves. This is for core support, our core services in responding to COVID. So last year it was about 24 million pounds. The year before it was 23 million pounds to 23.5 it was. And then this year it was still 15 million pounds So, you know, it's still a significant amount of support we've received from Welsh Government, and we've claimed that through the monthly coronavirus hardship claim and the income loss claim. So that's how we've done that. And, you know, again, this year we've worked really closely with WLGA and Welsh Government, and that has got us through really the financial impact of the pandemic, let alone obviously the more important non-financial impact of the pandemic. But you know, the impact could have wiped us out really, but financially, as far as reserves are concerned, so that help is obviously greatly received. So if I go to Appendix 1, which is the summary for the council as a whole, as you can see, the headline figure would be the 9.177 million underspend, which is obviously sounds high, but the majority of that 6.778 million is the improved position with schools. Out of that 6.8 million, 5.6 million of it is due specifically to grants that schools have received from Welsh Government late on in the year. So that, you know, that funding is for recovery from COVID, for educational purposes. We are looking with schools, and it's a nice problem to have. Instead of schools in financial difficulty, you know, we'll be looking at schools to make sure they've got plans to ensure that funding is spent and in a sensible way, obviously. So yeah, 6.8 million of it's to do with schools. 1.12 million is we're recommending that services that have underspent are allowed to keep their underspend, and we task them with coming up with proposals. So you could have an idea to make sure that services had, you know, thought out plans of what they wanted to do with that underspend. Normally, obviously, those plans would be formulated in conjunction and in consultation with their lead members, but obviously due to the timing of the election, etc., you might want to discuss with your head of service going forward. So really, the details on the underspends are just to give you an idea of what their plans are going forward. They may change as we head into the new financial year. So it's really approval in principle that you're happy for services to carry forward those underspends. So a normal, if you like, in inverted commas, underspend on corporate budgets of 1.6 million, which we've put in the budget mitigation reserve. And that was largely due to the release of contingencies that we hold centrally for things like staff pay, energy and NDR increases, pension costs. So all those sort of big ticket items that we take the risk corporately rather than services taking the risk. So you know, we have contingency in place there. The pay settlement for last financial year, we didn't receive till mid-February, I think it was, from memory. We'd managed to turn that around and actually get it in everyone's pay packets in March, which was welcome. Not only because you know, people have been waiting all year for that to be resolved, but it also meant they didn't have to pay the higher national insurance figure in April. So we were really hopeful that we would get that all settled in March. And obviously we as a council would have had to have paid extra on national insurance as well. So that was welcome. That did come in the end. You'll see that I've highlighted the additional RSG balance that I talked about in the body of the report, the 1.994. I've put that separately so you can see it coming in. It does have a weird effect on this table because it actually looks like, when you take all that into account, when you've taken the schools transfers out and the transfers to reserves, that we actually overspent on service and corporate budgets by 2.3 million. But as you can see, we've had to put that grant from Welsh Government in as funding. So it goes below the line, technical thing, but it just means that it looks a bit odd because we've underspent on our funding because we've had this additional funding from Welsh Government, and there's a small increase, well, higher than anticipated council tax yield, which is due to the hard work of our Revs and Bends service during COVID. So that was welcome as well. So the The tables just below just summarise the position for schools. So they're standing at almost £12.5 million balances carried forward, which some of you may remember a couple of years ago, schools actually had a net deficit balance. So obviously this is a welcome position, but it's one that we need to manage and make sure that they have plans in place to spend that funding. Earmarked balances that will be on a different appendix I'll go through, and just the budget mitigation reserve. That is now standing at 4.85 million because we've put that additional RSG in there, and the underspend from corporate contingencies has gone in there. Again, with the big caveat that we know that there are pressures, and we'll be bringing the first monitoring report to the Cabinet at the end of June that will highlight some of these pressures. But it's a good position to be in, but we know there's headwinds, as I'm sure everyone who watch the news every day, you'll know what those headwinds are. We also have service pressures that we're just starting to see. Children's services, for example. So we have some volatile budgets out there that we need to monitor carefully. And we'll bring the details of that to you in future cabinet reports, future finance cabinet reports. Appendix 2 is the summary of what heads of service have planned to use their underspends for. What we're really sort of requesting here is approval in principle that services can carry forward these underspends. Obviously, as I said earlier, please work with your heads of service if you have any questions or concerns about particular proposals that they can change. It's the principle really of allowing them to carry forward their underspend. We try to do that every year if we can. It fosters and encourages good financial management. If we can do this, if you strip away service underspends, it can lead to sort of suboptimal decision making, if you like, and rushed decisions, spending decisions. So to allow that flexibility for services to carry forward underspends does encourage better financial planning. So we do try to encourage or try to get approval for any underspends to be carried forward each year. Generally, there's a couple of different types in there. There's things that were planned to happen in 21, 22, but actually have slipped. So, for example, some work in finance and property, we had intended that we would have got that done in years. The late lockdown meant that some of the work had to be pushed out and won't happen until next financial year. And as you'd see, some of them are just for one-off items, upgrading software, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I've reviewed them as 151 officer. I'm comfortable with those proposals. And I won't go through in detail on the schools, mainly because I wouldn't know the detail for every school, so please bear with me on that. But this gives you a summary for each school, what their financial position is. And I am really pleased the last 2 years, that it's not, although that they have received additional funding from Welsh Government from COVID, and they've had savings, from schools being closed, which means that obviously there's the last financial year, the position increased, sorry, the year before last, the position improved, because if you have closed schools, obviously you're not spending money on energy, and you're not having to employ sickness staff to cover sickness. So all sorts of things like that have built up some underspends there. I'm comfortable with the position on schools at this stage. We know that there'll be trickier times ahead, and they need to plan now. Schools have that flexibility plan over a 3-year period. And as I said, I'll be working closely with Geraint to just make sure that those plans are in place. As they have to do that every year anyway, give us 3-year plans, but it's a different type of issue, I suppose, this year. It's about, have they got plans to spend that money wisely, rather than a number of schools being in financial difficulty. There's only 2 schools that are still in deficit balances, and they're quite modest deficit balances at this point. So I won't highlight them, but it just gives you the full list there. And then finally, Appendix 4 are the reserves and balances. That's the position for all reserves. So it does include the schools. As you can see from the top line, it just gives you the total figure for schools. There's some technical balances in there. So the capital schemes one is sort of a technical reserve where we use to fund capital schemes over the next 5 years, and we plan on that basis. So we do carry forward funding. So that is part of a detailed plan. The movements in here, the only two or three I think I'd highlight it. The adult social care reserve has increased by £2 million. That had run down to zero. That's to do with additional grant funding we've received in year from Welsh Government, and hopefully that will allow us some resilience going forward with social care for this financial year, as the pressures within that service are still there. They're not going anywhere. So hopefully that will help this financial year, and we'll review their position in the autumn as part of the budget process. And I think the only other one I just wanted to mention, the budget mitigation one is the other big one, which you've seen in detail in the other in Appendix 1. So you can just see it there. That's another big one that's increased. But as you say, the two amounts are the 1.5 million and the 1.9 million that have gone into the budget mitigation reserve. So I think that's hopefully a quick rundown, and thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Steve. That was a really comprehensive presentation to accompany the report. Thank you. So I'll go to cabinet members first. Barry, I saw that you had your hand up, but you've taken it down. Do you want to come in?
No, I'm okay, Leader. Steve, what I was going to ask, Steve covered. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Barry. Any other questions or comments from cabinet? Jill?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the schools budget and the fact that, that it's obviously very welcome that the challenges that schools still have ahead of them as far as addressing the impact of the pandemic. It's nice to see that a black hole in their finances isn't one of them, and that very much seems to be thanks to the timely support of Welsh Government, as Steve said. We're looking at 15 million in total. And there's a good amount gone to schools in recognition of the battle that they've had ahead of them. So that's obviously really good to see. We're not out of the woods as far as the pandemic's concerned in schools, and I very much welcome the plan for the underspend to be used partly on early years and family link workers, because as Steve quite rightly pointed out, although the financial position from the school's budget side of things is quite healthy, considering what we've been through, there is a cost of living crisis that's going to be going on in the homes of these children, and these roles are going to be absolutely crucial to try and build up now and build back and make sure that the cost of living doesn't have the adverse effect on our children that it might do. So it's very welcome to see that that's been prioritised, and I will be going through that with Geraint, to see how we can make best use of that.
Thank you. So that was more of a comment than nothing for Steve to address. Thank you. Any other cabinet members wishing to come in? Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Hugh Irving. Hugh, did you have your hand up?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Yes, well, that was a pleasing report, because we can see that things are heading, shall we say, in the right direction. But the comment I was going to make, ever so briefly, I hope, was just the high school that I'm associated with as a governor. Again, it's one of those schools that I think was running a substantial or significant deficit at one point. And now, of course, it has, much to the relief of the head teacher, I think, when I was talking to him the other day, it's now in a much more positive area in the black. But then Steve has just explained to us that to some extent, this has been assisted by reduced costs because of close downs and things like that. So I suppose my question is, are we confident that with the right financial management in the schools that we can keep these budgets in the black now, or is this just a temporary respite? What's your feeling for the future, please, Steve?
Are you happy with me to answer, Chair?
Sure, Steve, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's two things there. I think that the 12.5 million balances is is overstated in that sense that it will come down quite quickly, and we want it to come down, to be honest, because we want the children who are in school now to receive the funding that they need to catch up and to make up time and etc. So we need to make sure that funding is spent. And schools are are working on this, as I'm sure everyone, a lot of you are governors and will know all about the detailed plans that schools have. So in a way, we that 12.5 million will come down over the next 3 years quite significantly. And I think it's up to us to manage school budgets so that they are sustainable going forwards. To some extent, there is a little bit that there are some schools in there that will still have problems going forward. I won't name them, but there are a few in there that are only just in the black. Now they've got to recover as well. So they've got to recover help pupils recover, help the school recover from COVID, and they're only just gone into the black. So in a way, I think this probably is the best financial position that schools are going to be in, but it's in a position to start the process of recovery with. And I guess it's up to the council as a membership to make sure that schools are funded properly going forward in a sustainable way, and that will be an annual discussion we have as part of the budget process with yourselves, with Cabinet and with the wider council, because obviously the budget gets approved by council as a whole as well as Cabinet. So hopefully that helps.
Do your team, do the education department team, I suppose, do they support the schools through the school's any school's individual budget process, and try and flag up where an experienced eye sees something going wrong, or equally flags up the fact that there's surplus funds that could be spent? Are we supporting the schools through this process? We are. Not just leaving them.
No, just a sort of a brief word. Obviously, we have a different model in Denbighshire than a lot of other authorities. So we actually have finance people in schools themselves per cluster. So different models in each cluster, but broadly they have a finance professional within each school. We also have retained a small team in my service, and they work with that group of finance professionals that are embedded in the schools, and they, on an annual basis, they have to submit 3-year budget forecasts. And we work closely with education, because obviously there's no point us looking at it and saying, you should make savings here. We need to make sure that they're educationally correct financial decisions as well. So we work closely with Geraint and his team to make sure that anything is coordinated, and we're not saying things that, or recommending things that can't be delivered by schools. So yeah, we go through that process. In the past, that process has really concentrated on schools that we think, or that are showing financial stress. So we call them schools in financial difficulty. There's the particular definition of schools, and we help those on a one-to-one basis and go through their plans, and eventually me and Geraint have to approve their recovery plans. In a way, we're in a bit of a different position and an unusual position, because it's about, we need to do that as well, but we also need to make sure that schools have got plans to make sure this funding is used sustainably and to help the pupils that are actually there that need the help now. And that process, I've got a meeting I think next week with Geraint to start that process with schools, and that'll be going on over the summer. So yes, we'll be working closely with schools on both sides, both those ones who are still facing financial difficulty and those that need to develop financial plans to spend some of the reserve they have on the pupils that are there now.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll bring Hugh in, who's joined us in Ruthin. Welcome, Hugh. And Gareth, I can see you've got your hand up, so I'll come to you next. Thank you. Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, welcome to the new Cabinet. It's nice to see you, or nice to see the Cabinet back in the room, which hasn't been. I promised myself I wasn't going to speak about schools today, but I'm going to speak because of what Jill said, which was, I thought it was fantastic to hear that you have an understanding of the challenges that the schools are facing. And I think that will be a big message to the head teachers, because I came up cropper with another leader in North Wales who wouldn't take the message on board that schools were struggling. So I think that's really good to hear that today. So, and wish you well in the role. And I will try not to touch on it, because it's very difficult when you've been living and breathing something every day. And I could answer a few of those questions, but I won't. My questions on the finances are more about the future of the assets and of the cost of running Denbighshire. I raised with Graham in the last cabinet that I'm very concerned that this building is still very empty, and the effect that it has on not only the building and the cost of running the council, but also the economy of the town. For example, the same in Rail, the same may be in Denby. So I just wanted to steer really where we are going with regard to assets and occupying the buildings, with looking at the finance, because it's, as far as finances goes, it's pretty healthy situation we're in at the moment, and that's good to know. But I'm just thinking, when you see an asset like this building, what is the future? And I don't know whether it's one for you, Jason, or one for Graham. I just want a bit of clarity about how we're moving forward. Diolch.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Hugh. It's a very good point. After being away for 5 years and coming back, that's something, one of the first thing I noticed about the buildings. Absolutely, but of course that it's post-COVID and it's part of the recovery. But on the technical side of sort of the asset management and how that impacts on finances, I'll hand over to Steve. Course.
Is that okay then, Steve, as well? Obviously, in terms of occupation of the buildings, the situation post-COVID is still fresh for us. So we've got our project we call New Ways of Working. So we've mentioned this before, where at the moment we're being quite liberal in terms of asking staff to start to decide themselves, within the caveat that it's still got to be right for the business, for the council, the way we operate, to start to come back to the office and start to find their own rhythm around their own work-life balance, and whether they can work from home or coming into the office. So we've not made any kind of rule that says everyone must come back for 2 days a week or for 3 days a week. And we're going to monitor that to see how it works over the next 6 to 8 months. And that's our position, to understand how staff are going to start to use the buildings, how that impacts upon the delivery of the business, because in the end, that's the most important thing. And then we'll start to make some decisions around what we're going to do. So we're letting it kind of work through a little bit by giving staff an element of freedom to decide how they want to work. What I would say is it's never going to go back to like it was pre-COVID. So it may well be at the end of that, and we don't know yet, I'm not preempting it, but it may well be, it'd be logical to think there's a possibility that in 6 to 8 months' time, when we start to review this, we might conclude that we've got too much building space for the amount of staff that are using those space. And then we'll have to have a strategy around what we're going to do with that building space. And at the moment, we've not got any work on that, but that is something that we need to have an eye on the horizon. And that might be around what are the alternative uses, what are partners doing, how can we start to use that space? Because we are probably, as Denbighshire employees, aren't going to need all the office space that we've currently got. I don't know if you've got anything to add there, Steve, for me. Thank you.
I don't think so, Graham. I think the only thing to add is that we've always been clear in that New Ways of Working group that property, so the sort of asset side of it and any savings target is secondary to the recovery and bringing people back and supporting people into working how they want to work. As Graham indicated, we will react from an asset point of view to those other decisions that are made. So yes, in 6 months' time, if the position is still the same, we will need to look at our asset portfolio. At the moment, we're still seeing what the staff's behaviour is going to be and what their actual choices are going to be, following the fact that they can come back to the office. So it's the staff that are leading this rather than the desire to make any savings or make any significant changes.
If I can come in, Steve, that of course you're still saying that you will have an eye on how we manage the assets once we're, if not at the end of, but coming to the end of that
Yes.
process of how staff, it's almost like once the dust settles on working patterns as we're coming out, while that process is ongoing, we'll have an eye on managing, so I'm probably looking at the wrong camera, managing the capital assets
That's right.
and long-term plans with them.
Yes, that's right. I mean, obviously we are doing work and planning things now. We're not looking at it at all, but we're not making any decisions or any proposals until we know what the position is going to be as far as the occupancy of the assets and how they'll be used. Say we are doing a lot of research and a lot of planning, but no decisions have been met, and we will be led by the HRE staff type decisions around work-life balance and things like that. We will respond to that and make sure we've got an asset portfolio fit for wherever we end up in 6 months' time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent answer. Thank you. So Gareth, I know you've been waiting, but I've got cabinet members waiting to talk on this. So I'll bring in Julie and then Jill.
Just to reiterate what Steve was saying, I think it's important that it is staff-led. We've been through a pandemic, and for people's mental health and well-being, different ways of working and letting the dust settle, I think, is important. And then obviously looking at the assets afterwards. There could be other businesses in Denbighshire in the same position who may feel that they've got too much building space left, and there could be opportunities for, as Jason, you've already mentioned, about collaboration and collaborative working and that sort of thing. So, okay, just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Hugh, actually. So thank you for your good wishes. And, I have noticed you chomping at the bit back there a little bit. It's sort of, that obviously you held the portfolio before, but, I do want you to know that it's in good hands. I've got 25 years of educational experience cross-sector. So I do feel like I bring a lot to the table, but thank you for your comments, and it's good to know where you are as well, as far as a heads up with our current position. I just wanted to clarify my point about who was struggling, really. My point that I made earlier was more about the families that are struggling rather than the schools themselves, and it was in reference to the family link workers that were obviously being supported by the reserve spends that are left over. Our schools have absolutely reacted in a really admirable way to what's been thrown out at them due to the pandemic. I also am on the chair of governors. I'm also on the governors that Hugh mentioned earlier. I've been through that journey with them, and their response has been amazing. The families themselves, there's a lot coming down the line, as Steve mentioned. There's headwinds as far as the cost of living is concerned. So I just wanted to clarify, really, that I have nothing but admiration for how the schools have managed, but we do need to recognise that families themselves are struggling, and that of course has an impact on the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Rhys, I'll bring you in if you've got your hand up there on screen.
Thank you, Leader. I think Hugh made a very good point there about the council's built assets, and I just like to go back to that for a moment. As a council, we have declared a climate emergency, and we have a number of council buildings. I just want reassurance that we will take the energy efficiency of those buildings into account, as well as other matters, since our climate emergency is something that we are working towards in this council. So if I can have reassurance that we will be looking at that aspect of our built assets as well. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Rhys, and I'll make a quick point and say the first thing I did when I walked into my new office in Ruthed was turn the heating down. Yeah, that's something that needs to be looked at.
Yes, I completely agree. We made a few improvements to County Hall just before lockdown, so we put in a heating management system, a zoning one, so that we can heat different bits of the building differently. That hasn't, I don't think, been used in with a full County Hall yet, so we haven't seen the benefit of that really yet. But it does give us some flexibility around the office use, and yes, that needs to be borne in mind, and we work closely. Dave Lorry, who's the county landlord, works really closely with the carbon programme on the building energy reduction strand of that programme, which is a large part of that programme, as was mentioned in the earlier report with Nicola Neal. So Dave Lorry's on that and goes to the programme board. So yeah, he's fully involved in both sides. So yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Gareth, I know you've been waiting very patiently. Thanks very much. Do you want to come in now? Thanks, Gareth.
It's okay. I've got a few more questions now in the meantime, so you're going to regret that. So just looking at the improvements that we've made in balances, Steve, will this be recycled into an increased capital budget for the future as something which can have a longer term effect rather than a 12-month spend? Just going back to what Councillor Irving said about school budgets, I think we need to look at it on a long-term basis over the next 3 to 4 years. I'm in a school governor where we've been through the bad times. We've had a negative deficit. We've now spent to improve. We've invested in our staffing on our buildings, but we have faced and will face, this is a bigger problem now, a drop off in the young people's population and an increase on the older people's population. So that's going to have an effect for a lot of budgets in the future. And just to reassure you that we have an excellent financial management support in place, which not just looks at the short term, but looks at the long term. So although the school in question is spent a lot and spent more than we've received this year, it is very much investment into the future. But just going back onto contributory budgets, which was something a few people have mentioned, I'm a strong believer. I've spent the last 2 decades in working with as trustee for third sector organisations, and where we've seen the budgets go really far and stretching is when it's contributed by both the staff as well as the volunteers, the trustees, or in this case as the councillors, and where they've combined their efforts and both parties see each other working for the same effort, which is the benefit of the organisation. So I'd like to see that perhaps that culture of contributory spending and budgets rolled out throughout the council in a great deal. So just those few points, but thanks very much.
Thanks, Gareth. So covered a number of points there, but really good points. Steve, do you have any? Do you want to come back on any of those?
Yeah, I just mentioned obviously the reserves and balances. The Appendix 4 is it's at a point in time is as at 31st of March 22. They are reviewed annually as part of the budget process, and I think possibly as a new cabinet you'll want a lot more information on each one of these as we review them. We normally review them as part of the service budget meetings in the autumn, but there are a number of corporate ones there as well, and obviously the budget mitigation reserve is the one that is the most unhypothecated, if you like. So that is to support the budget process and the budget setting in any way that the cabinet and council sees fit each year. So that could be used. We could try, for capital purposes if that is what is decided. Just to note that the capital programme has benefited as well from the focus of this report is on revenue. The capital programme next year has benefited from additional funding. So Welsh Government seem to like the 1.6 million figure. There seems to be a lot of grants of £50 million for all Wales, which for us always equates to 1.6 million, or there or thereabouts. So unhypothecated capital funding was received in March as well, as the revenue funding that I talked about. That was it was specifically a capital grant, but it was unhypothecated. We have used that, and you'll see this in the report that comes into the next cabinet, because we'll have the summary of the capital programme for this financial year, the new financial year. We've recommended that 1.6 million is put into the contingency the whole capital programme to help fund some of these pressures that we're seeing coming out of tendering processes, because suppliers costs are increasing. Everyone knows the pressures. So we put that in the programme itself. Now, as part of the budget process, we've also put in some revenue funding, which will fund borrowing to allow us to start looking at approving some of the schemes that were identified as part of the horizon scanning capital process that will feed into a medium-term capital plan. I did talk about this, and some of you won't know anything about this because you weren't in the council, but in July last year, I presented a report and our thoughts around the medium-term capital plan. I think we thought COVID might have been finishing soon, that we'd have loads of time to devote to it, but that's still on the agenda. We've got the list of projects from services. We need to review that, and we'll be coming back with a plan, a process, and I'll be talking to my lead member about how best to do that, so that we have a process that the funding can be spent, how Cabinet and Council want us to spend it. But that funding has been put in place as part of the budget process last year, to help start that process of approving projects rather than just talking about. We've got all these projects that people want us to do. We have actually identified some funding as part of the budget in 22-23 to help start actually delivering some of those projects.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks. And Councillor Feely, I see you've got your hand up. Bobby, do you want to come in?
Yeah, very briefly, Leader. It was attached to the point that Hugh Hilditch was making earlier on about the office working and whether or not we're going back. And Graham came in talking about looking at it in 6 months' time. And in 6 months' time, that will be nearly 3 years in a sort of hiatus of not knowing which way we're going in terms of the forward situation within the council, in terms of where and how we're working. And I just thought it was worth asking the question, as there are 22 authorities across Wales, what are all the other authorities doing? Because in general, we're seeing the rest of the working society out and about there, getting back to some sort of normal much more quickly than we are here in local authority. And I just wondered how they were handling it in the other 22 authorities across Wales.
I'll bring Graham in, but it's there's so many wide and varied numbers of different types of employers across the whole of the country. And I think we'd have to have some data-based, evidence-based figures to show what the move back to work was. I don't think we can make any assumptions that large organisation, large employers are herding employees back to work. And I'd make the point that Julie made earlier, that I'm pleased to hear that the way we're thinking on this is based around the needs of the staff to deliver the work they do. And whilst we need to look at what other local authorities are doing, I don't think we should be guided by some more gung-ho elements of the private sector who are herding their staff back to work. Just my thoughts on it. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Bobby. It's always good to know what other local authorities are doing. And 2 weeks in the job, I don't know what the answer to that is at the moment. So I'll hand over to Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I mean, of course, we had the COVID response period, didn't we, where we all had to go home and there was legal requirements to do so. So we're now into the COVID recovery kind of period, aren't we? And this is the one where staff are starting to get back into offices and actually council business coming back into County Hall. Today being a good example of that. We wouldn't have done this 6 months ago. We'd have all been doing it virtually, not hybrid, with the majority of cabinet sitting here in the room. So it's a kind of new situation for us in terms of coming back out of the COVID recovery. Whatever normal is something that we're going to find out over the coming months, because our emphasis is on the needs of staff and to ensure that staff, we talk about staff led. It still needs to be for the operation. It still needs to make sure that we're delivering what we need to, but there's a degree of flexibility for staff, and we're not dictating, as I said, that they need to come back for X number of days. And that's very similar to what other local authorities are doing. And in North Wales, the chief execs meet on a regular basis, and we're certainly not out of step with what's happening with other authorities in North Wales. And also our HR department, there's a regional HR group, and that Louise Doodle, who's our HR manager, is talking to other HR managers across the region in local government to understand what the position is and learn from what others are doing as well. So I think it is a period of time where we are going to learn, we are going to adapt. No firm decisions are being taken at this stage, because we're going to, through COVID recovery, find out what's best for Denbighshire, but having regard and understanding what other authorities in the region are doing as well. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. That's an interesting answer, and perhaps we can, when we get some more feedback from what other local authorities are doing, we can get that out there to the members. And I think I just want to clarify what I said, and I'm pleased that it's staff-led, but just to pick up on what Graham said, it's staff-led in terms of how they conduct day-to-day work-life balance, but it's also staff-led in how they deliver the services, deliver what they're supposed to be doing, their job as Denbighshire employees. So that's important as well. Okay, thank you. Emrys, I'm going to bring you in after, because Barry had his hand up as a cabinet member just slightly before you put your hand. So if I bring Barry in, and then I'll bring yourself in, is that okay?
Barry? Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Leader. Yeah, just going on that, and I mean, Bob is quite correct in what she's saying. Obviously, there's a worry there. People around the country, you know, have found a new way of working. Some have not gone back to the jobs because they found out they can do different things from home. And my point is, and I think the chief exec actually said it, that they're meeting with the other councillors, and I think it's vital that we do, you know, keep in contact with all our other neighbours, our other councils, and use best practice for this, you know, to get our work people back into the offices, and then come up with a solution. It won't be easy because, like I say, a big building like Ruthin, maybe 2 years down the line, we might not need a place that size. But it's just about speaking to other councils, see how they're doing, and use best practice. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you, Barry. I'll bring Emrys in.
I just wanted to respond to what Councillor Feely said, and in relation to what Councillor Hugh Hilditch-Roberts said. When I came into the offices for a necessary reason during the lockdown period, the first lockdown period, it was like the Marie Celeste here. There was nobody about. I've been on floors 2 and 3 in the past 2 days, and it's lovely to see that staff are slowly returning to their desks. Of course, there's an economic value to that when these members of staff go out to the town during their lunch hour and so on. So certainly there is a wish to have staff returning to offices, but some staff will be happier working from home. And if that work can be done successfully from home, I've got no problem with that at all. I think I'm right in saying that the health service are using the lower floor in Colledfryn as a call centre. So that's something to look at in the future. And in Ruthin, of course, we've got community nurses on the ground floor here as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we've already seen some innovative thinking about use of space with Colledfryn, and I think Councillor Clewitt, my fellow ward member, is a district nurse. She does some work out of this building as well. That's interesting. Thanks, Emrys. Has anyone else got a hand up?
Thank you, Leader. Just to say, a lot of members of staff that I know have said that they do want to get back into the office. They do miss the camaraderie of people around them, things like that. So that's another point to think about. The other thing too, of course, people like Barry can go on holiday and still join in.
Yeah, and we'll take the opportunity to say thanks to Barry. And in fairness, he booked the holiday a long time ago, at a time when we thought we wouldn't be quite as busy as we are. I think that's right, isn't it, Barry? So I'm looking with hands up. Oh, apologies, Hugh. I can't. If you've got your hand up, Hugh, please come in. I think it's
yeah, thank you. Just very briefly, I'm just picking up actually on the point that Councillor Hugh Hilditch made, and I'm not disagreeing with everything that's been said this morning. There's been some very valid points. I do think we just need to keep in the back of our mind the impact that our buildings do have on local economies. And it may well be that if we find we've got a building where there's a lot of surplus space, it may well be there's another organisation may want to rent a floor or a section, and that might be one of the answers. These things do have a tendency to evolve naturally, as it were, and adjust to changing circumstances. But I don't think we should entirely disregard the impact that our workforce and the buildings they work in, the impact that that has on the surrounding economy. And I think that's an important point to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. So I think we've sort of strayed into another debate on post-COVID recovery and the workplace. Sort of come across that by mistake, but on the basis that we seem to be okay for time, that's been a really interesting discussion and some maybe slightly differing views, but you know, so everyone's got a different angle on this particular topic, and it's very much a personal choice, isn't it, from a staff point of view? So yeah, interesting debate. So there's no one else looking to. Okay, so we'll go to, this being the case, we'll go to the recommendations. So the recommendations are that members today note the final revenue outturn, and going back to the start of the debate, that we members are happy to approve the treatment of the reserves and balances as outlined in the report and the appendices. Do you want to come in at this point, Gwyneth?
Thank you. Actually, I was going to be making the recommendation.
Sorry.
Which is fine, but it doesn't matter. O'n I just eisiau neud sylw bach yn dilyn beth pawb.
I just wanted to make a comment following hearing all the contributions, many valuable contributions about returning to work. But personally, I feel that we shouldn't be looking at the county council as maybe a mechanism for promoting the economy of Ruthin, because if they work at home, they'll be promoting the local economy of the towns and villages. And travelling to Ruthin is a lot of petrol or fuel in the commute. So I do appreciate what Graham said, that the council's work is the priority. The question of returning to the office or not should be led by the staff. I think that's the correct way forward. You want me to do the recommendations? The recommendations are, first of all, that members note the final revenue outturn position for 2021-22. That members approve the post-treatment of reserves and balances as described in the report and detailed in appendices 1, 2 and 3. And finally, that members note the details of transfers to and from the earmarked reserves as set out in Appendix 4. Thank you very much.
So, do you have a second for that? When? Okay, so that's carried. All in favour? Yeah, excellent. Okay, so final agenda item is number 8, the forward work programme, which I'm sure you've been able to have a look at. I'll turn to Gary because we are going to make one addition to the June meeting, the agenda for the June meeting.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, and there is just one correction in the item for the Future North Wales Construction Partnership. The lead member will be Councillor Julie Matthews. But also there's an additional item to come to the June meeting, which is an item relating to the levelling up bid for the Clwyd West constituency.
Thank you, Gary. Do any cabinet members have any views or any comments on the work programme? No? Okay. I think that concludes the meeting. Oh, do you want to come forward, Hugh?
Yeah, I'm glad, because I was going to raise where the levelling up fund was, and that's great. What I was to ask as well, Gary, can you check for Band B on when that will come back, because there's nothing up until December, and that could hold up some investments in, especially in Denby. So I think it's important that we just keep an eye on that, if you can, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. Thanks for raising that. That's noted. Thank you. Right, so there's no other speakers. I'll thank everyone for attending today. Julie, sorry, did you want to come in? No, okay. For the, as I said at the beginning, first cabinet of this council term, thanks very much, and thanks for those who joined us on Zoom. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.